So the OnePlus 10 Pro has just launched over in China, boasting shiny new tech like that fresh Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 chipset and upgraded camera hardware, once again in partnership with good old Hasselblad. And I mean, that's enough tasty tech to truly tickle the taint of any mobile fan out there. And admittedly, yeah, so far the 10 Pro doesn't seem like a huge evolution over last year's OnePlus 9 Pro, which is still a highly satisfying smartphone in almost every way. In fact, it's hard to believe that this shiny flagship is 9 months old already, such is the increasingly meaningless concept of time. And yeah, a full 9 months on, the OnePlus 9 Pro will still cost you a rather hefty 829 quid, but hopefully that cost will be slashed with the imminent release of that OnePlus 10 Pro. I really enjoyed the OnePlus 9 Pro when I first reviewed it way back when, so I thought I would see how it holds up in 2022 by slapping my SIM back in there and use it as my full-time smartphone for another week. This is my long-term OnePlus 9 Pro re-review, and for more on the latest and greatest tech, including that OnePlus 10 Pro, please do poke subscribe, ding that notifications bell, and yeah, that's it. So I am still a fan of the design here, even if the OnePlus 9 Pro is a big old bugger at 6.7 inches. This is most definitely a handful and a half, although the soft curves do at least make it comfortable to grip. As I stated back in my original review, this morning mist finish is very pleasing to the eye indeed, even if it does pick up greasy, scuffy prints and dust all too easily. However, that Gorilla Glass 5 surface has picked up a fair few scratches and nicks over the past 9 months, which does somewhat mar the appearance. I was hoping that Gorilla Glass surfacing would stave off any wear and tear for at least the first year or so with the OnePlus 9 Pro, but sadly that's just not the case. No real other complaints though. The OnePlus 9 Pro is still one attractive mofo, and that water resistance has kept the phone from harm when I've accidentally knocked it flying into my sink. Now, of course, one of the most intriguing recent OnePlus developments was the announcement that OnePlus's Oxygen OS launcher and Oppo's Color OS launcher would be merging into some sort of mega launcher, which will of course significantly change up the software experience on OnePlus smartphones. Here's hoping that the end result is a Voltron style affair where the combined force is greater than the sum of its parts. At the moment, it is still pure blood Oxygen OS here on the OnePlus 9 Pro, although it is the older version 11, as the big Android 12 and Oxygen OS 12 update was unceremoniously yanked this month like a particularly limp penis in a brothel of disappointment. The main reason the update was pulled was because of a buffet of bugs that it unfortunately introduced, although the ColorOSification was also virtually shat on by a section of fans. Here's hoping they do better with Take 2. And although a lot of fans are understandably down on the whole Oxygen OS Color OS situation, I'm personally kind of cautiously optimistic and looking forward to seeing what the results will be like, because I really like the Color OS 12 beta, those slick animations and the refined apps. For now, the software experience on the OnePlus 9 Pro hasn't really changed up much since the launch, although things are a lot more stable compared with the shit shower from 9 months ago. When I first got my hands on the OnePlus 9 Pro all those many months ago, it was about as stable as a jelly skyscraper. I mean, have these guys not heard of user testing or anything? But now, thankfully, it is playing very nicely indeed, no troublesome bugs with everyday shenanigans. In terms of features, there's been a wee bit of spit and polish here and there, but nothing major. You have a shag ton of personalization options, some mental well-being tools, proper gaming features, all stuff that I already covered in the original review. Despite its slightly awkward positioning down near the bottom of the screen, that in-display fingerprint sensor has held up marvelously, almost always gives you a successful read first time, even when you've got quite moist mitts. And I'm also still a massive fan of that edge-mounted alert slider as well, which is just super handy for sticking the OnePlus 9 Pro in Do Not Disturb mode without having to dick around, unlocking it and going into the various menus. It's definitely super psyched to that as a feature that will be returning for the OnePlus 10 Pro. And speaking of the OnePlus 10 Pro, one area that they've apparently improved upon over the 9 Pro is the mighty 6.7-inch AMOLED display, once again boasting the very fashionable LTPO tech. This basically just allows the refresh rate of the screen to dynamically switch from lower levels all the way up to a peak of 120 Hz here on the OnePlus 9 Pro for a buttery smooth experience when you're flicking about in menus or messing around in supported apps. Truth be told, it is hard to imagine a better panel than this mighty effort here, with its Quad HD Plus resolution pumping out incredibly sharp visuals despite this epic size. Color tones can either look impressively lifelike or be boosted using the display's vibrancy settings, which really makes the picture face-slappingly delightful when you're enjoying some anime or other poppy content. And whatever was causing the dark picture when I streamed Netflix content back in the day has thankfully been sorted, and yes, you've got full HDR support with razor-sharp contrast. And it is also super potent on those top brightness levels as well, so no worries if it is a bit sunny outside. But my only real complaint is with the occasional bit of palm intrusion, which is caused by the fact that the screen actually curves slightly around the edges. I've noticed it's particularly annoying whenever you're reclining on the sofa or in bed because of the way you have to sort of grip the smartphone. There's a problem I first noticed about 9 months ago when I first reviewed the OnePlus 9 Pro, and it's a problem that sadly has not been fixed. The stereo speakers have held up just as well as that display, while the Bluetooth connectivity has been perfect as well, with strong codec support for crisp, full-bodied audio. And I'm still not even close to filling the 256 gigs of storage on the OnePlus 9 Pro as well, despite shooting shag loads of photos and video, and that's probably just as well because there's no micro SD memory card support. Now, Qualcomm's Snapdragon 888 chipset guarantees smooth performance whatever you're up to, even if you're torturing the OnePlus 9 Pro with prolonged sessions on the most graphically intensive games. The pesky heating issue does still pop up to do a nasty turd in your soup if you are Genshin impacting for several hours on higher detail settings, and that is despite this phone's dedicated cooling tech. But all the same, I saw minimal impact on the actual gaming performance, again, even on Genshin Impact on those maxed out detail settings. And the OnePlus 9 Pro certainly coped absolutely fine with the likes of Call of Duty Mobile, PUBG, stuff like that. And I did see some performance issues when you maxed out Genshin Impact back in the day and really pushed the OnePlus 9 Pro, a fair bit of stuttering and juddering, but thankfully that seems to have been rectified in the ensuing months for whatever reason. The worst that you'll get now is that back end does get rather toasty, but thankfully not uncomfortably so. As for the battery life, well, that also seems to have improved with time here on the OnePlus 9 Pro. When I first reviewed it, I tended to make it to bed with just the dregs of the battery remaining with fairly intensive use. But these days I tend to have at least 10 to 15% remaining at the end of a very long day with around 5 to 6 hours of screen on time, a lot of camera use, all that good stuff. It's definitely still not as good as the Google Pixel 6 smartphones, but then few are, to be perfectly fair. And when the OnePlus 9 Pro is drained, you've got Warp Charge 65T tech, so you'll be fully powered up again from empty in under half an hour. Alternatively, you've also got super fast wireless charging on here as well. So again, you can get powered up in under an hour, providing you've got the appropriate kit. Now, the 9 Pro was one of the very first phones launched after OnePlus leapt under the sheets with optics expert Hasselblad as part of a 3-year deal. But of course, when the OnePlus 9 Pro first emerged, this relationship was still far too fresh to have really had much of an impact on the camera performance. And I gotta say, in the ensuing months, not much has really changed beyond a couple of little minor tweaks here and there. That 48 megapixel primary sensor is generally dependable, capturing detail-packed pics in good lighting and also coping well with sharp contrast, if not quite as convincingly as the Pixel phones. The Pro doesn't fill its pants in darker conditions either, as long as it doesn't have to deal with any sudden motion. Pets and kids and irritatingly mobile subjects like those do often come out a bit blurry in softer light. If you're shooting something that's obligingly static, however, chances are you'll still get a good photo, and that nightscape mode works well to brighten up proceedings when you're snapping in the dark. Convince your sprog to sit reasonably still, and you'll also be treated to some slick looking portrait shots, which seem to bulk up a lot less often than they used to 9 months ago. And yeah, sure, the OnePlus 9 Pro ain't no Pixel 6 when it comes to capturing natural looking tones, but honestly, it'll be absolutely fine for the vast majority of users. The 50 megapixel ultra-wide angle shooter is a little less reliable in trickier conditions and again struggles to capture natural looking hues, washing out some of the stronger tones. But you don't get any pesky distortion, which is impressive. And that telephoto shooter is great for getting a bit closer to your subject when needed, up to around the 10 times zoom level, after which things start to get a bit blurry and cack. So overall, you've got the full flexibility here as offered by most other premium rivals as well to suit pretty much anything you want to do with it. And there is a final fourth lens on there, a somewhat superfluous 2 megapixel monochrome lens, which obviously OnePlus has realized is a bit pointless because they've ditched it for the OnePlus 10 Pro. The video chops here are perfectly respectable too. I tend to keep the OnePlus 9 Pro at 4K resolution as that 8K mode seems a little bit like overkill to say the least when I'm just shooting clips of my cats f***ing about or whatever. The visuals certainly aren't as strong as what you'll capture with Apple or Samsung flagships, with especially soft results in artificial light, but again, it's fine for simple home movies with very respectable image stabilization and reliable audio capture on top. And last up, you've got a 16 megapixel selfie cam, which does a proper good job of shooting your mug. In fact, it's actually better than those Pixel 6 handsets, especially when you're in murkier surroundings. So in a nutshell, the OnePlus 9 Pro is still a solid smartphone in almost every department, although sadly it has been surpassed by the Pixel 6 and the Pixel 6 Pro and a couple of other Android rivals. So here's hoping the OnePlus 10 Pro can restore the balance. And yeah, this sort of price point, 829 quid, I'd say it's a no-brainer, definitely go Pixel instead. But if you happen to see a nicely slashed discounted price on the OnePlus 9 Pro once the OnePlus 10 Pro strolls into town, then at the very least it's worth considering. So anywho, that's my long-term review of the OnePlus 9 Pro after using it as my full-time smartphone again for a full week. But what do you guys reckon? Have you been using the OnePlus 9 Pro? It'd be great to hear your own personal reviews down in the comments below. And for more on the latest and greatest tech, including that OnePlus 10 Pro, please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell, and have yourselves a bloody wonderful rest of the week. Cheers everyone, love you!